In 1993, a 2,500-year-old tattooed woman was pulled from the Siberian ice, and Russian scientists locked her away for 2 decades. The reason they never wanted you asking about her is stranger than the burial itself. You never learned her name in school. There's a reason. She knew things about human history that someone needed buried again. The Ukok Plateau, southern Siberia, a frozen highland where the wind never stops and the ground never thaws. Archaeologist Natalia Polosmak was excavating a burial mound in 1993 when she hit ice, solid, ancient, perfectly preserved. Inside it, a woman, 25 years old, dead for 25 centuries, wrapped in silk, surrounded by 6 sacrificed horses, covered from wrist to shoulder in tattoos so precise that modern artists have called them technically superior to most work done today. She was Pazyryk nomadic people who ranged the Eurasian steppe 5 centuries before Christ. History calls them barbarians. That's the first lie. The Ice Maiden wasn't buried like a nobody. She was laid in a larch log coffin packed with ice to last forever. Her headdress stood nearly 3 feet tall. Her silk blouse came from China, meaning these so-called wandering primitives operated trade networks spanning a continent. Her tattoos told a mythological story. A deer with griffin antlers, a snow leopard, creatures intertwined in a symbolic language still being decoded. No crown, no weapons. What she carried instead, cannabis seeds, fermented mare's milk, a pouch of coriander, the tools of a healer, someone who moved between worlds. Researchers believe she was a shaman, a woman with genuine authority in a society that mainstream history insists didn't give women authority. Then they ran medical scans on her bones and found something that changed the story completely. She had cancer, breast cancer, advancing into her bones. By the time she died, it was debilitating. The cannabis wasn't ritual, it was palliative. A 2,500-year-old woman was managing terminal cancer with a plant that 20th century governments spent decades insisting had no medical value. But that's not even the strangest part. Her burial wasn't the burial of someone who died. It was the burial of someone who chose. The 6 horses weren't offerings, they were companions for a journey she agreed to take. The evidence suggests she didn't simply succumb. She was prepared, costumed, elevated, set in ice deliberately as if someone knew she needed to last, as if someone wanted her found. Thousands of years later, the Indigenous Altai people would say exactly that. Russia would pretend they hadn't. But here's what doesn't add up. When she was extracted from the plateau, the Altai people, her direct cultural descendants, immediately protested. They said she was an ancestor, that the plateau was sacred, that removing her would bring disaster. Within years, the worst earthquake in the region's recorded history, mudslides, floods. The Altai didn't call it coincidence, they called it consequence, and they demanded her back. Russia said no. For 19 years, she sat in a Novosibirsk laboratory while scientists published papers about her tattoos and said nothing about who she was to the people still living in her mountains. That silence wasn't accidental. When institutions go quiet that long, someone decided they should. Here's what they didn't want examined too closely. The Pazyryk Ice Maiden doesn't fit the story. The official story, the one built into every Western curriculum, places sophisticated civilization in specific locations. Greece, Rome, Egypt, the literate settled empires that became the ancestors of the modern West. Nomadic peoples of the Eurasian steppe are a footnote, primitive, peripheral. Their role in the timeline is to be conquered or converted. But the Ice Maiden proves the Pazyryk were running trade networks in silk and gold when Rome was still a village of mud huts. She proves they had medical knowledge the West took 2 millennia to rediscover. She proves women held spiritual authority at a time the textbook timeline says that wasn't happening anywhere that mattered. And her tattoos prove something even more inconvenient. The people history dismissed as backward were, in certain measurable ways, more advanced. Not primitive ancestors of civilization. Something else entirely. The Altai people knew what she was. They called her a protector of the land. Russia finally returned her remains in 2012, 19 years after taking her. They never explained the delay. They never said why. If the Pazyryk could build continent-spanning trade networks, manage terminal illness with herbal medicine, and produce tattoo artistry that modern artists call superior, what else were the so-called barbarians doing that you were never taught? Every culture dismissed as primitive by the civilizations that conquered it held knowledge those conquerors later claimed to invent themselves. The Ice Maiden is one data point, but she's a data point they physically locked in a laboratory for nearly 2 decades. You have to ask why. When a discovery challenges who gets credit for civilization, who was sophisticated, who was powerful, who counts, it doesn't disappear. It gets managed, published in journals nobody reads, released quietly when the controversy fades. The textbooks never get updated. The Altai say she was placed in the earth as a seal, a guardian holding something beneath the plateau contained. When she was removed, the land cracked open. She has been returned now, but the earthquakes haven't stopped. What exactly did someone pull out of the ground in 1993, and what, if anything, did they actually put back?